just got the opportunity to talk to one of the best in the business. Dan Casey is arguably the most prolific content creator in football right now. Not only does he have this massive social media following where he breaks down, analyzes, and shares diagrams of football plays across all levels of football, but he's also an author of multiple books that I know you guys would love. He participates in multiple podcasts, with his most recent being the Play Callers Club, where he and his coaching peers discuss college and NFL offenses and defenses. On top of all of this, he just came out with a new software called Chalk, where coaches across all levels have the opportunity to go in and diagram their own playbooks. It's safe to say that this guy knows what he's talking about, and I was super excited to talk to him about football. Hope you guys enjoy. The thing that I wanted to set the foundation of the conversation with was what made you interested in sharing your knowledge of the game with the public and being so adamant of sharing your love for the game.
For sure. No, I mean, it's first of all great to be here. Appreciate you having me on. I think you've been a long time follower, and I know we've interacted a few times here and there, and obviously you guys have had some success in Montana that I've tried to keep up with a little bit as well. But yeah, I mean, for me as a coach, we're at a really interesting point, I think, in kind of the history of football. I don't mean to like overstate it necessarily, but I think in the past, knowledge in football was very much tied to like who you learned from. So like who you played for, who may have coached you, your coaching connections, maybe your dad coached or something like that. So there was very tribal knowledge kind of set up in the way that football worked. And when I was getting into coaching, I didn't have necessarily that coaching tree. I'd played at several different high schools. My high school coach was probably the one that I was closest with. And in college went through some staff changes and lots of different coordinators. I played defense in college, but always wanted to play offense. And, there were some great offensive coaches that were around, but I, didn't really get a chance to interact with them as much as I would have liked. So starting off, getting in out of the ball after having played defensively in college, I didn't even know where to start. I was like, where do I go to for information? I didn't necessarily have the network that some other guys do coming out. And so for me, it really just began as a kind of a quest for knowledge and trying to figure out how to teach the game, how to learn the game. When I was coaching high school football, I was 23 years old, trying to figure it out and trying to put an offense together. And what I found is that there was like a small group of guys on Twitter that were sharing knowledge and sharing film and doing all this different things. And I just decided like, hey, I need to branch out. I need to learn from people. So I just really started connecting with as many people as I could. And through that process of connecting, also sharing what I was learning. And so I think it was like kind of twofold, right? It's like in one sense, there's an input coming in with all this information about football. And for me, I'm the kind of person that if I get excited about an idea, I just have to share it. And so that's really as simple as it was. It started out as creating a Twitter account for football and learning one thing every day and sharing it and kind of passing it down the road. And it's really grown into something pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me, from the outside looking in, as a guy who eventually wants to get into coaching someday, and a guy who, subscribes to your one play a day
For sure.
newsletter, which is awesome. I got notebooks on notes about things I want to do in the future when I, have a team, so on and so forth. But I think, like, when you talk about what you do, you go all the way back to like old 1920 single wing stuff, which
For
I
sure.
love. And so there are plenty of starting points where we can go to when we talk about trends in offensive football. And I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'm not going to take you all the way through the Walter Camp single wing days, So, but what I do want to start with is I think one of the major revolutions in the NFL specifically in terms of offense was when Bill Walsh comes in and starts implementing
Yep.
his West Coast scheme, because before that it was all heavy run game. You
Right.
pass on
Yep.
third down if you need to. But I think the implementation of the West Coast offense was the first major shift in offensive philosophy, where your passing game almost turned into an extension of your running game,
For
and
sure.
they
Yeah.
turned into a pass, probably maybe a pass first offense. But why do you think it took until Bill Walsh for teams to realize that a passing scheme could be not only something that you could just fall back on when the run game isn't working, but it could be something that you could build your offense around?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, I don't know if you can see on my wall here, but I've got pictures of Bill Walsh pretty
Yeah.
much
Yep.
everywhere. Over
Yep.
here with Montana, I think he's over
Yep.
here with Montana, and
Yep.
he's a huge hero of mine. I've got man, I think just about every book ever written about Bill Walsh is on my
Yep.
desk somewhere. And so he's a huge inspiration for me, and this is why I think learning the history of the game is so important for coaches, because you can go into a study of the West Coast offense, and you can hear John Gruden's terminology and all this, and super complicated pro style stuff. But the West Coast offense was really founded as a solution to a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what it's important. It's important for coaches to remember that Bill Walsh, he's a genius in his own right. There's no doubt about it. But it's not genius for the sake of genius, right? He was using his problem solving skills to solve a problem in his offense. And really, what happened was, I'm gonna butcher the names. I wish I
I think
had
it
it in
was it
front of me here.
was it was it was Greg Cook. I'm
There
sorry
you
for
go.
interrupting, but
No,
it was
no,
Greg
this is
Cook that
perfect. This is perfect. Yeah, you're on it.
it
And
was
so when
Greg
Greg
Cook that
Cook
started it, and
when
then
he
going
when
to
he went
Virgil
down with an
Carter.
injury, yeah,
Yeah.
Virgil Carter comes in, arm. And what I always like to tell people is, Virgil Carter played for Lavelle Edwards at BYU, so he was actually kind of familiar with some of this stuff as well. Kind of the changing of the guard in offensive football. So it all, everybody does say it kind of comes back to Bill Walsh. I think it also comes back in some ways to Lavelle Edwards at BYU and Doug Scoville and the team they put together there. But yeah, I mean, Bill Walsh, he had to figure out a way to make Virgil Carter an effective player in his offense. And so that's really where the kind of short patterns and rhythm and timing of the passing game and the precision really took off. And then, Joe Montana, a lot of people consider him maybe one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But from like a pure physical skill set, there were definitely other more talented quarterbacks. Like a Dan Marino had a much bigger arm. You guys like Jim Kelly and others. But I think Montana was kind of the perfect skill set for that offensive system, and that's what I think has really intrigued me about offensive football, is that you see certain coaches truly maximize the skill set of certain players they're coaching, and I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Like nothing matters in terms of what we know as a coach until we can help somebody execute that on the field. And that's why it's such a puzzle to solve every single season. You may have a system, you may have things you believe in, but every single season something you have to is a puzzle you have to solve and
Mhm.
figure out, which guy works best with which scheme, and that's what makes it so fun every year.
Yeah, and I love how you tied in the fact that you have to take your personnel into account,
Yep.
because uh, especially in high school, as you know, like your personnel is going to roll over every year. You're not always going to have the same guys. You have to have
100%.
answers. You have to have
100%.
answers for whatever you have.
Well,
Um,
take your own experience for a second here. So
yeah.
you played at Montana. You guys had a ton of success. How much did your offense change when I'm blanking on his first name? Quarterback McDowell comes in
Mhm.
from Texas. How much does he affect what you guys did offensively from what you did maybe earlier on in your career?
Yeah, exactly. Like the kid that we had at the beginning of the year was more of a prototypical pro style
For sure,
passer. I mean, he could pull the ball down and get a 5 yard run if he had to, but we weren't going to design quarterback runs for him.
sure,
When we had Clifton come in, I mean, we were quarterback run heavy. We were running
no
the
doubt,
ball. It was crazy, because the terminology didn't change, formations didn't change. It was a tag here or a tag there, just to
totally,
just to get your players the ball,
no doubt, no doubt. That's the way it's done,
No, that's awesome. That's awesome that you knew that. That's really cool.
no doubt.
So I guess when you talk about these, as you go from the Bill Walsh era and going forward from the 80s into the 90s, how does more of a pass centric offense change what NFL teams are looking for in terms of their personnel? So like in terms of going from a run game to a passing game, what do those personnel changes look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, not only is there schematic shifts in the game, there's also rule shifts in the game, right? Like the game is evolving, and so obviously from a rules perspective and just the way the field is formatted, with the NFL and the hashes, it's going to favor a pass game probably more than a run game, just in general. Now, obviously, you've got guys like Kyle Shanahan that are masters of the run game and do some really creative stuff. But I think, you know, that shift definitely matches up with some of the rule changes to try and make it a more passer friendly league. And so I think at that point, you're really starting to see a shift in football more generally, that you maybe can have some success, but you can't be really truly successful without someone pulling the trigger at quarterback that can do some special things for you. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is a perfect example of that. What Brady was able to do in New England was different, obviously. Like he wasn't making off schedule plays, but
Mhm.
just his knowledge of defenses, getting them in the right looks, getting the protections properly set. Obviously, some of the athletes they had, like Gronk, matchup nightmares, and he always just kind of knew where to put the ball. And you can just see the ways that a special quarterback does transform what you can do offensively.
Mhm.
And it's going to depend on some of that skill set, right? Like you're not going to see a ton of QB run game in the NFL. And the big reason for that is just keeping guys healthy. I mean, it's impossible to keep guys healthy these days.
Mhm.
Um, and probably always has been. But I would say, Bill Walsh still has a massive hold on what people are doing offensively in the NFL, just in terms of that West Coast terminology. But I think you're seeing some trickle up from the college levels. You're seeing a lot more spread passing game. You're seeing kind of air raid adjacent concepts where it's a concept based pass game as opposed to like individually tagging every route, which makes life a lot easier for quarterbacks. And so
Yeah.
I think to answer your question, I don't know if I'm totally answering your question, but I would say the biggest shift, since maybe the days of Bill Walsh to now, is probably coaches looking to give more autonomy to the quarterbacks, and free them up to uh, play with comfort in the pocket and be able to make a read all the way across the field and just trust what's going to happen in the pass game. I don't think you're seeing maybe quite as much razor precision in the passing game. There's a lot more choices and options and different things like that. That's freeing some of these guys to make the best decision based on the coverage they get.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into it's cool. You're hitting like every single point that I have listed on my notes here.
Good.
When you were talking about Tom Brady and the concept based passing game and everything like that, I think that was like before like the 2010s, you would still see pro style adjacent offensive schemes throughout the NFL. I don't want to say everyone was kind of running the same stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot
For
of,
sure. Yeah.
there wasn't a whole lot of variation team to team, maybe division by division, but team to team, it seemed pretty cohesive to what had been done. And I think when you look at back at 2000, I think it was 2007 when Tom Brady and the Patriots decided, we have all these weapons. We have Wes Welker, we have Randy Moss, we have Tom Brady. We're going to open it up, and it really became like an air. I would probably say air raid adjacent scheme. I think
Sure. Sure.
there's a stat that I saw when I was doing research for this recording here, that they were the first team in the NFL to use the shotgun over 50% of the time during the course of the season,
There you go. Yep.
when the league average at the time was around 20%. And you still had guys in there like, Drew Brees was in the league. It was early in his career, but he was still there. Peyton Manning
Right.
was in the
Yep.
league. And they decided that they had all these weapons and they wanted to be creative, and they wanted to open it up and let Tom Brady throw for almost 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, and have Randy Moss set, this single season touchdown record and everything like that. So I think it was really cool. I think that was probably the pivotal point in the NFL where you see now, where most teams are in the shotgun 60% of the time and they're passing the ball. And I think that was a really pivotal point in the NFL in terms of offensive evolution.
No, I completely agree. And obviously with Brady, the cool thing about them is they were able to stay in kind of standard personnel groupings and but spread the ball out wide. Like when you look at those Patriot teams, they always had a really good pass catching tight end, even back to like the Ben Watson days.
Yeah.
And they always had really, really talented pass catching running backs. And so you could be in 11 personnel, you could be in 21 personnel, you could be in 12 personnel and still get to some of those empty or spread concepts. And, it's interesting when I'm talking with NFL guys, all of their formations and personnel groupings, like if you talk to somebody who's been in it long enough, everything's kind of based out of 21 personnel where you have two backs and a tight end.
Yep.
And so like the fullback and all that was still very popular. And from me, as a young coach who did not grow up in the NFL and didn't wasn't exposed to the pro style stuff early on, I was exposed to more maybe air raid or option or different things like that. And for me, my base is like, 10, 11 personnel. So like when my brain goes to like base football, it's 10 or 11 personnel. When a lot of these pro style guys think of base football, they're thinking 21 personnel or, maybe even 22 personnel. So it's a shift in thinking. And I think what you're seeing is the game is very cyclical. So what's coming back around?
Yep.
Everyone's in the gun now, but now we're starting to get under center again,
Yep.
starting to get in 12 personnel again. You're starting to see some fullbacks, even what the Lions are doing. And so that's one of the things that I love about the game that makes it so special is just when you think you're on the cutting edge, the 1920s pop up and look where we are again.
Yeah, with Andy Reid pulling out single wing
He
plays.
always does. He always does. Genius.
Yeah, and so I've been doing a fair amount of research as I prepare for my NFL career. I'm a film junkie. I always have been, and so I've been trying to dive into what different teams have been running, and the theme that I have noticed throughout the past couple of years is the increased use of the Shanahan system. There's so many branches of that tree now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So when you talk about 12 personnel, 21 personnel, like that's becoming that cycle is starting to come back around, and I think it's really cool to see. But it's not like they're doing it and running power 50 times a game. They're not just doing
Right. Right.
the standard stuff. They're doing the wide zone. They're doing boots. They're doing really cool stuff. And so when I guess when you talk about the Shanahan system, why are so many teams using it now? Is it just because the coaches that have implemented it in the past have been so successful and they're just trying to tap into that, and that's just how the tree grow that's just how the tree grows? And what are the advantages, disadvantages of it? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, success breeds success.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
and success breeds opportunity, which is cool to see as well.
Yeah.
I think the Shanahan tree, it really goes all the way back to his dad, right? I mean, the Broncos and Terrell Davis and John Elway and some of the things they're doing, it's not dissimilar to what's happening now. But I think, when I'll mention to coaches, the prevalence of 12 personnel, for example, one running back, two tight ends. Um, that's not personnel for personnel's sake, right? It's not throwing a tight end out there just to be a placeholder. I think the uniqueness of the Shanahan system is not necessarily in the personnel groupings or the formations. It's in the specific and special types of players they have to be able to get in those formations. So, they may be in 21 personnel, but you got your tight ends, George Kittle, your fullback is Kyle Juszczyk, who could play receiver, running back, anything, tight end, anything. And then your running back is Christian McCaffrey. So think about the plethora of formations you can get into with that group and nothing changes, right? So the defense, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to identify that personnel in the huddle and send out a personnel to match, right? So they may just stay in nickel because you still have pass threats everywhere. And if
Mm-hmm.
they stay in nickel, what's Kyle Shanahan going to do? He's going to formation you. He's going to find the bubble and he's going to run wide zone. He's going to run counter. He's boom. I mean, I'm not saying it's simple. It's simple, but it's not easy, right? I mean,
For sure.
it's
Yeah.
complicated, right? But in the sense, it's like Okay, you want to get in your base personnel. You want to put a Sam linebacker out there. Fine, we're gonna get an empty and let Purdy cook a little bit. And
Hmm.
so I think that's what you're seeing. And the same goes for, Mike McDaniel, right? The straw that stirs the drink in so many ways with some of these offenses is that kind of hybrid fullback position they have. Alec Ingold in Miami is fantastic. And so when you have a guy who is not only a willing blocker, but also a capable receiver and really freaking smart,
Hmm.
you're probably going to be able to do a lot offensively. And I think that's what people miss out on sometimes is, the positions in football right now that are devalued are running back and fullback, and not so much tight end, but tight end to an extent.
Hmm.
You can get some really, really good players for cheap. So why not stockpile running backs, fullbacks, and tight ends and play that offense when everybody else is trying to, pay out marquee quarterbacks and receivers and maybe, having to scrimp elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I just as when I look at the Shanahan stuff, I always looked at it like, yes, I love the shifts and emotions and playing around with personnel, but I really love the wide zone stuff because I
Oh
think,
yeah,
yeah, just for my uh the way I believe that my skills translate. I'm not a guy as a center. I'm a guy who likes to get out and run
no
and
doubt,
likes to get on those angles. Uh, I think I think a lot of, especially at the high school level, because when I've listened to your stuff a whole bunch. You have to have something that you can hang your hat on,
no doubt,
and especially at the high school level, I think if you can find guys that fit in those spots, that wide zone stuff, you can do it a ton of different ways, and I think it makes it really easy for a quarter. Whether you have a really experienced quarterback or a younger quarterback, it makes it easy for your running back because you just got to find the lane, man. You gotta see the cut and you gotta hit it, and with the offensive line, you just put them on a track and let them run and be athletes. So I
no
love
doubt.
that stuff. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perfect for athletic offensive linemen, and I think what you're seeing in the NFL, and it's not dissimilar in high school either, is you're basically on every offensive line is on a continuum of speed and power, right? So, you have some that are kind of more speed based, more athletic and maybe a little lighter, and then some that are kind of more big physical road grader type guys. And so you basically build your run game off of what type of personnel you have. So, you know, when I look at a Shanahan coach team, with the exception of maybe Trent Williams, who's just an absolute freak of nature. I mean, most of those guys are going to be your more athletic types that you're going to pull them on counter, you're going to pull them on power, you're going to run wide zone. You're not going to see as much just straight downhill duo type stuff. And then you look at the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're really building the interior of that offensive line to run more downhill. The bigger body guards that are, pluggers that they can run duo, and they ran it a lot last year,
And
right? And so
that's what I noticed for them. They
yeah,
ran a lot of
yeah,
duo and instead of just straight up inside zone, and it was
a
wide
hundred
zone and
percent,
duo.
100%. And so I think basically in the NFL, this is way oversimplifying it, but I think if you were to ask most offensive coaches, you would say, are we a wide zone or a duo team? And
Mhm.
based on that answer, you kind of build everything else out. Obviously, you got your gap schemes, but nobody's in the NFL, at least I haven't seen many offenses build entirely off of like a gap scheme in the same way that maybe college offenses can get away with running a bunch of counter and that's kind of their base run game. Not as successful in the NFL. It's hard to kick guys out 20 times a game.
Yeah, it's hard to kick guys out, and it's hard for a center to go and get a back block 20 times a
No
game
doubt.
because
Yeah.
in my experience, on like fourth or fifth time on a back block, defensive lineman sees the formation, you run power and
Yep.
counter out of the same formation every time. Back block, he's gonna swipe you. You try to
Mm-hmm.
work over top.
Cross your face. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
hard.
that's a SOB, man. That sucks.
No doubt.
So
No
um,
doubt.
and so like I said, I've listened to plenty of your stuff on the Play College Club, the Coaches Collective, your newsletter, all of it. I've been a big fan for a long time. Um, and so one of the things that I found really interesting when you talk about how football is cyclical, you see patterns all the time. You've talked about how concepts trickle up. And I think you've said it already. The concepts
Yeah.
trickle up. So high school goes to college, college goes to the NFL. I think the lower levels are more willing to implement new ideas than the higher levels because they have to come up with creative solutions to maximize the talent they have on the field, which is something that we already talked about. Um, so do you think, like what concepts or ideas have you seen become more common at the NFL level that weren't as common back in the day, but they've trickled their way up through the lower ranks?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think you're exactly right, and I've talked about this a lot. And Andy Reid even says it about the kind of the trickle up effect. And I think a lot of it has to do with, in high school you're not going to get fired for trying something necessarily. I mean, yes, you will, but like it's a little lower risk opportunity there. And say, and college, you're not, at Montana, you're probably not dealing with the same type of message boards that you're dealing with at, the University of Alabama. I'm not saying, people aren't passionate about the game, but it's just a
Yeah,
little bit of a different scale. And
yeah,
then in the NFL, from week to week, your job security can be in question.
yeah,
And all it takes is that one decision maker to say it's time. And so I think there's a almost an inherent conservatism in the NFL to um, kind of protect themselves. You're never going to be fired for making a consensus decision, right? So a lot of times you see things take a while to get all the way up there. But I think, some of the air raid stuff, I think, is probably what I would point to as something that has definitely trickled up. And you're going to find those types of concepts in just about every NFL offense at this point. And when I think of air raid, I can pretty much, we can talk about mesh, we can talk about Y cross, we can talk about um, four verts, and we can talk about, some version of stick or, kind of quick game type stuff. Everyone's going to carry that. You're seeing a guy like Todd Monken bring a lot of that stuff to Baltimore. And you're seeing, I think, maybe more of a willingness to implement some of these ideas. I'm actually very interested to see your new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb and what he does in Seattle. I mean, I was a huge fan of what they did at Washington this past year, and so yes, I think you're seeing innovation happen, particularly in the pass game, make its way up to the NFL. But everything takes time. But one thing I've noticed about the NFL is that if somebody figures out something that works, everybody copies it immediately.
yeah,
And so you're constantly the pressure you face in the NFL is you come up with these new ideas, these good ideas, and they get pretty quickly by a very good defensive coordinator. Find a new edge and a goal. And so it's very hard for an offensive system in the NFL to be just point blank successful over many, many years because defenses, just like offenses, are copying what works.
yeah, for sure. For sure. And so I guess I'm gonna put you on the spot here. What are some of the things that you would like to see NFL teams implement that colleges and maybe even high schools are doing? What schemes, what concepts, what philosophies would you find to be interesting at the NFL level that aren't there yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see a little of it, but it's dangerous because of injuries. But I think some of the QB run game stuff is really interesting. But I think you have to be creative in the way that you approach it. I would like to see there be a little more of a blurring of the lines between the quarterback and the running back position. I've talked a lot about the two quarterback system stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there are some really great athletes. I mean, there's one coming out right now in the draft, John Rice Plumlee from UCF, who really talented runner, can throw it, baseball kid. He kind of, I know it's cliche to maybe say he fits a little bit of the Taysom Hill model, but what can you do with someone like a Taysom Hill or obviously they've done stuff with Jalen Hurts. He's a different level of quarterback. He's a really, really impressive quarterback.
Hmm.
But so you can't run him 15 times a game or anything like that. But I think getting +1 in the run game is important. I think QB run game is the easiest way to do it. And so I would like to see maybe more of that stuff, but I think you need to be creative in the way you present it. So I would love to see some of the two quarterback stuff take over in the NFL. You can still have your pocket passer back there, your franchise guy, but then have another guy come in that can run it a little bit. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. when you talk about that, like option run game and QB run stuff has a special place in my heart. And so
No doubt.
I love looking at the you go back to like 2012 and RG3, Russell Wilson, and everybody were coming in. I love the Greg Roman stuff
Oh
where
yeah.
with what he did in San Francisco with Kaepernick, and and then you look at what he did in Baltimore and have Lamar. And when you have Lamar Jackson, I mean he's a generational athlete, no
No doubt
matter
about
whatever
it.
sport you have. So I love looking at that stuff. And what I think about with Greg Roman is he goes option run game, but he doesn't do it out of 10-11 personnel. He gets into
Right.
heavy sets. He does, he makes things creative. He does the option run game, backside read on power instead of having the tackle just hinge block. He reads that backside end man line on the line of scrimmage, and you don't really see that in the
Yeah.
NFL. So I
Incredible.
love looking at that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's funny in the NFL where some of the best coordinators, most efficient coordinators, fan bases get kind of tired of them. It's
I
like
know.
a guy like Greg Roman did a fantastic job in Baltimore. And I think there's just kind of a natural life cycle with a coordinator that sometimes you just need a change of scenery. You need to work with somebody new. Probably the same is true for quarterbacks. Obviously in college, right? You're turning over every 4 years, you're working with a new group. And so you may be able to teach the same things over and over again. I think in the NFL, there is a life cycle with these coaches, and that's something interesting to pay attention to as well. Is that just because a coach gets fired or there's parting of ways doesn't mean that coach is not a good coach. It may just be time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what he does in LA with the Chargers, and obviously you're working with a much different quarterback. Justin Herbert's impressive in his own right, but he's a different style of quarterback, and so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. I know everybody's going to be intrigued to see what that offense looks like next year.
Yeah. And then to wrap up here, because I know you gotta head out to another meeting. I just want to give you the stage and let you talk about your new book, since this is kind of what inspired me to reach out to you and
For
talk
sure,
about
man.
this.
For sure. Yeah, so I've done a couple other projects over the years, called them the Ultimate Guide. So I've taken one concept and just like drilled as deep as possibly drill on it, and try to pull out all the interesting stuff. And so yeah, this is Trends in Offensive Football. This is my author copy right now. I'm waiting for the other ones to come in the mail. But yeah, this is more of an overview, right? It's more of saying like, here's what I'm seeing. I've digested a ton of film from this past year, and here's what I expect to show up next season, a lot, based on the conversations I've had with coaches, on the just going and visiting people and seeing what they're studying, and what I'm studying. This is just what I think is interesting in football right now. And like I said, football is cyclical. And so in order to be ahead of the game, you almost have to like go back and be behind the game.
Yeah.
And so that's where I just preach the importance of knowing football history. Obviously, like you mentioned, you've referenced several things that make it obvious that you're a little bit of a historian of the game yourself, and I think that's so important for coaches because when I started coaching, everybody was running, I call it like kind of the Clemson 11 personnel offense, right? It was Chad Morris at the time. Gus Malzahn was running something similar at Auburn. And the temptation for me as a young coach was to say, "Oh man, like Clemson's winning national championships. Gus Malzahn, they're rolling with Cam and then Nick Marshall. They got this offense rolling." And the temptation was, why don't I just copy and paste this thing and run it on my high school team?
Hmm.
And that's kind of the easy way through it, right? Is just to learn one system. But what I realized was from my development as a coach and, moving forward in the game, these systems do change and what works changes. And so in order for me to have kind of a long career like I'd like to as a coach, I would need to know more than just one system.
Sure.
And so I think in studying the game, you realize like there is good football everywhere you look. And there's so many different systems that they're playing good football. So whether it's the Delaware wing T, the Mike Leach air raid, it's different forms, but they're all trying to get to good football, right? And so I think when I sat down to write Trends, this book right here, what I really wanted to do was not encourage coaches to follow every trend, but a lot of times there's a wrinkle here or there that can kind of unlock something for your team. And so that's really what I'm encouraging more than anything is like, hey, maybe you can take this little trend and run with it, and maybe it becomes kind of a staple piece of your offense. Maybe you try something and it doesn't really fit with what you do, throw it away right away. And I'm just big on that experimentation. Like try things. If they don't work, get rid of them as fast as you can. If they do work, explore them some more. And I think it goes back to the beginning of our conversation with Bill Walsh is like innovation comes from problem solving. Like it's not for the sake of innovation, it's for the sake of solving some problem that's out there. And so that's my big encouragement to all the young coaches is learn the history of the game and solve problems for your athletes, and the rest of it kind of takes care of itself in my experience.
Awesome. Well, shoot, this has been great. I've been following your stuff for a long time, and being able to get on a Zoom call with you and talk about this stuff has been awesome. So
No doubt, man.
I really appreciate you coming on and doing this.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you, and definitely good luck in Seattle, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.